Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to yet another Workshop Wednesday. Today we're talking about how to implement a measurement plan. Of course, before we go a little further, if this is your first Workshop Wednesday, welcome. We've got a lot of new members here, so I wanted to thank you for swinging by. My name is Chris Mercer. I actually do go by Mercer, and I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io. And whether you found us through Digital Marketer or CXL Institute or Social Media Examiner, or maybe you're already an existing member, whether a Toolbox member, Win Monthly Pass, or Academy, welcome. We love having you here. Of course, if you are not familiar with measurementmarketing.io, our whole job is to help people like you learn how to use these tools that are amazing, that are free, to help us improve our marketing. So maybe know our numbers, we trust our numbers, ultimately we can grow our numbers, and we do that using a measurement marketing framework. Now, this particular framework, it's 5 key pieces, and it helps put the trainings in context, which is why we cover it every time here. So planning is all about that KIA process. Now, we've talked about that in a previous workshop, in many previous workshops. We're going to talk about that today, but that is KIA. It's question, information, and or action, and you're going to see all 3 of those here in today's training. Building, of course, is how you actually start to collect the information that you need using like Tag Manager or Google Analytics. And then you've got the reports where you're building out dashboards, hopefully something like Google Data Studio you're using for that, because it's amazing when it comes to dashboards. Now, once you've got your main benchmark information, you can start to forecast. And that's what is incredibly important, because it shifts your mindset and you start marketing forward. In fact, coming up in the middle part of May, we're actually going to have a new Win course focused on forecasting entirely. It's going to be Win forecasting and results, so stay tuned for that. And then, of course, once you've got your forecast in place, you can measure against your forecasts, and that's how you will know what to optimize. You're going to know what step needs to be adjusted and why it needs to be adjusted, because it'll just be super apparent. It'll be super easy. You won't have to guess anymore. The numbers will lead the way. All right, now with all of these particular trainings, remember, it's just one thing, one new idea, one different way of looking at something, one new tool or different way of using a tool that you can take. And then once you have that one thing, that one new skill, practice that. Then you come back, rewatch these workshops, pick up another new one thing. All right, let's go ahead and get underway, shall we? Strategy session, how to implement a measurement plan. Now, this is a strategy session, which means we're not going to go into details about how to use Tag Manager and the specifics of Google Analytics and everything else, because this is all about strategy. And that is these strategy sessions are made for 2 types of individuals. One is you're the strategist and you're the implementer, in which case this will be helpful. 2 is you're the strategist, but you're not the implementer. So you're working with somebody else in your team, maybe a vendor that's helping you to actually implement this information, but you still have to understand kind of the strategy behind it. Now, we've talked in a previous workshop about how to actually build out your measurement plan and how to actually get the whole thing started. And again, today's a little bit more into brass tacks, like how do we move it forward? So we're going to go ahead and dive right in, and I'm going to show you a tool. Now, this is available to everybody who is watching this. So if you're watching this now, you've got access to the tool. It is in the toolbox area of the members site. But this brings in that KIA process. Now the look of this tool may change from time to time, but the structure will basically be the same. So I wanted to cover all of that here with you. And we're going to start with hopefully something that's already familiar to you, which is KIA, especially if you're a fan of Workshop Wednesday, measurementmarketing.io. You know we talk about KIA all the time. Question that you're actually trying to answer, the information you're going to need to make sure you get the answers, and the actions you're going to take. QIA. Question, information, action. Okay, so this is where that KIA process comes in. So we won't go into too terribly much detail about this, just because we've already covered this a lot of times in previous workshops. But this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where you start actually penciling that stuff out. And then, and this is very important, you add this additional step, which is, okay, how is this going to look on the dashboard? How is this going to look on the report? Now, this is important. Again, we're thinking strategy. And if you're an implementer and you're working with a strategist, so much better if you watch this as well. So I'm going to run through a very quick example of this. So let's say the question is, I'm trying to figure out, let's just say how well my opt-in fund. Well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about how well my sales is doing. Now, when you first come in, we're going to have to make a copy of this, because this is something I get a lot of where people come in and they try to get access to this. You don't need to get access to it. You don't need to request access to it. Just come in, go to File, make a copy, and then it will be yours. And you can do everything that you want with it. Everything you're about to see me do, you're going to be able to do, but you have to make a copy of it. So just a little heads up. All right, so now that you've made a copy of it, you can change and put your name in there and everything else because it's yours at that point. So let's talk about this. Now, the question being answered. So we talk about results and how a lot in measurement marketing. So it's what result are we getting? How are we getting those results? So typically, that's a good place to start with questions. If you're trying to think like, what are the important questions that I should be asking for my own business? It's going to be around results and how. It's going to be around that. That's just the best place to start. So I'm going to start there and say, well, let's pretend for us, for the, let's say Win Monthly Pass, like for a program like that, or let's just say Toolbox membership. So let's just say the Toolbox membership. So how well is the Toolbox membership funnel working, right? So that might be the question that I'm trying to answer here. In fact, what I'm going to do is very quickly reduce these down, make it a little easier to read. There we go. So let me do this too. Look at me editing on the fly. All this stuff hopefully will be done for you by the time you come in here, but you get the idea. So how well is the Toolbox membership funnel working? What information do I need to know in order to get that? Now, this is for those of you who are just strategists. You might not know all the information. You might not know what to ask for. That's where you work with your implementer to help build this for you, or with you, I should say. The two of you are working together. If you are the implementer, you'll know this. But if you're not, again, if you're just a strategist and you're working with your vendor or somebody else in your team who's actually building this out, the two of you need to put your heads together to think this through, because they are going to know, the implementers will know more of what's available. That's information, and you might not even know how to ask for stuff. So for example, you can start with what you know, and that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to need to know the number of opt-in views, right? How many people actually viewed the offer? I'm just going to call it offer views. So how many people viewed the offer? And then I need to know the number that saw the thank you page. Okay. And I'm just going to put a little short code in here again, because this is just for you. But that's the information I'm going to say at this point that I would need to know. So how many people saw the offer? How many people saw the thank you page? And to bring this into something a little easier for us to wrap our heads around, let's say I'm just going to show you what it would look like here. So if I come into the toolbox, this is what I would personally be measuring in this little example. How many people saw this offer, which is this page, and then how many people completed the form and saw the thank you page that pops in after that. So those are the two things. It can be that simple. You don't have to make it overly complicated. I am a fan of good enough to get going, and then you come back and make it better later. There's always an opportunity to make things better. Don't worry about getting it right the first time. It's just get it better. That's it. So get good enough to get going, come back and make it better. So when I know this, let's say I am trying to answer this question: how well is the Toolbox membership funnel working? I need to know the number of people that saw the offer. I need to know the number of people that completed that offer. In this case, our thank you page, and then the actions to take. So what actions will I be able to take based on all of these different this information that I'm going to have, these answers that I'm going to get? Well, what actions do I want to take? Now, this is the strategist part. This is for the not so much for the implementer of a part of you to answer. It's the strategy part of you to answer. What actions will you actually take with your marketing to improve things based on this information? Now, one huge clue: if you cannot figure out what actions you will take, you are just measuring for measuring's sake. And I would suggest you don't do that. I would just say, well, if you can't tie it to an action, this stuff is probably not important. It's just quote unquote good to know. And good to know stuff isn't really all that useful. You don't want stuff that's good to know. You don't want stuff that's interesting. What you want to have is stuff that's actionable, things that you can actually take an action on. So think this through and force yourself to come up with that action. So in this case, again, just to kind of top of my head, I might say, well, if the conversion rate is less than, let's say 30% to cold traffic, then, work to optimize offer, optimize copy. And then if it's greater than, let's say 35% to cold traffic, then scale traffic. Right? Then that's what I'm going to do. So now I've got a couple of different actions that I can take. Now, this is important. You don't have to put a ton of detail in here. It's not about that. It's about just getting the rough cut of what are you going to do based upon the answers that you get from the questions that you're asking. So you as a strategist, you as the person in charge of making these marketing decisions. So here I can already see, okay, conversion rate less than 30% to cold traffic, then I'm going to have to, work to optimize the copy and offer. And then if it's greater than 30% to cold traffic, then I'm going to scale traffic. Now, this is very important. look at the information that I'm collecting right now. I'm collecting the number of offer views, and I'm collecting the number in the thank you page. Now, again, this is a strategy session here, but I'm speaking to the implementers. They're going to know this. And if you are an implementer and you're trying to figure out how do you bridge between strategy and implementation, here's a perfect example of it. A strategist will say, well, here's the stuff I want to do, but they will ask for this number of offer views that saw the and saw the thank you page. So they will get a report that basically says, conversion rate. So I'm just going to put, conversion rate, and that's it. It'll just say that. So, okay, that's great. And it might say as an example, and I'm just going to put in an example. So plan for the dashboard might say example, 35%. Okay. Now, so let's say a conversion rate says this toolbox membership equals 35%. Great, but that's not what I asked for. That's not the actions I'm looking for. Because notice this phrase right here, cold traffic. So when I was thinking about action, I was thinking about how I'm going to scale my cold traffic. That's a very different thing. And that needs to be, all of a sudden, this needs to come back. I need to say, okay, I need to know the number of people saw that thank you page. And I also need to be able to tie it to traffic source. Okay, so now I need additional information, not to answer this question, to make sure I can take the action. Because now I need to be able to break this down and say, okay, this is 35%. And now it's going to say cold traffic, 35%. And again, that could be Facebook, whatever else you want. And maybe it's something else is like, affiliate equals, let's just say 47%, whatever it is, right? So something like that. So what this is helping us do, and I'm just going to take out this word example here because I think that'll be sort of redundant. But with this here, I could say, okay, well, if I had a dashboard that basically said cold traffic is this, affiliate traffic is this, my traffic from within the blog is this, like however I want to start breaking it down. And this is why you sort of role play this in your head from a strategist perspective. Again, this is real high level, but you are starting to get into the mud a little bit here. You're starting to think through, what is this dashboard going to look like? And what do I just want a number? Do I want a table? Do I want a pie chart? Right? What are the different things that I need to see as a strategist? What's the fastest way for me to get this number so I can take the actions that I want to take? And what'll happen is, and you'll see I've already done it here, where you start saying, well, cold traffic, I would want to know, 35%, but I would also want to break it down by other traffic sources like affiliate. Well, now I'm expanding out the actions, and I would come in here and I would add in, okay, if affiliate traffic, right, and come back into the actions and say, if affiliate, less than 40% needs improvement, right? So that's, I would have to, needs to optimize, right? That's something, if it's like horrible like that, I need to do that. And then we can come back in again, you work with your implementers on this because they know what's possible. And if you are the implementer, you'll learn this if you don't already, but you might have that conversation of, okay, they may come back and say, well, I can give you a number that just says this, but what if we had that number change colors? What if the block was red if it was less than 30%, and if it was green if it was higher than 35%, but it was yellow in between? Or what if affiliate traffic was red if it was less than 40%, but if you wanted it, let's say the goal would be 60%, then it would go green, everything else is yellow. So it sort of gives you some ideas in the dashboard itself. The dashboard could give clues. Again, you as a strategist go, yes, that would totally be great. Now you're not building out anything right now. You're not watch this happen. Remember, this is a strategy session. This is all about strategy. You're working with the implementer to help them to implement this plan that you've been thinking about. So, but you have to have these conversations with your implementer because they will come back and say, well, you know what? We can also measure when somebody comes into the field and when they actually start to enter the field, because then we might see that, hey, they're actually coming into this, but they're not actually completing it. Maybe that would be a step that we would need to know because it's an engagement step. It shows engagement to the form. Maybe your opt-in form is a button and it pops a modal, and you want to know, did they even click the button so that they even could opt in? Like maybe that's how your particular customer journey goes. So these are the different stages and steps as you go through and you think about all the different behaviors that are happening on the site. What information do I want to know? Did they scroll down? And if they scroll down, did they end up going back up, or should we put another form here? Well, I might measure that. Again, an implementer, somebody who understands what's possible with Tag Manager and has the skills to be able to measure scroll rates and maybe just the fact that you can see a certain section for a certain period of time, because that's also possible. An implementer will know that. They can have this conversation and say, you know what we could do? We could measure this, we could measure this, we could measure this. We're already collecting this stuff, and they might already be collecting different clicks and things like that, where they already have the information information they need, or it might be something they have to set up. But this will start to help them understand what they're going to need and how you're going to use it. And what will happen is it won't be just fill out this, then this, then this, then this, and then go to the next line and then go to the next line. It'll be fill out the first round of what you think this is. Then based on some of those answers, you might come back and change this. Based on this, you might end up changing that. Based on that, you might come back and change that. You might decide, okay, actually we have a better question. And you rework this over and over again until you've got a really good plan that's now implemented, essentially, right? The plan is implemented, which means it's officially in the implementer's hands and they take it over. It's done with you from a strategist perspective. And the implementer knows what question that you're trying to get an answer to. They know why you're trying to get the answer, which is the whole action thing. They have a very clear understanding of the build now, which is this stuff, all the information they need to make sure is being collected and why it needs to be collected because of the actions. And most importantly, they've already role-played with you the dashboard stuff. Now, if you haven't taken yet Win Google Analytics dashboards beyond basics, please do that because we talk about dashboard planning in great detail there, where you can get a really good understanding of kind of the wireframing of a dashboard and see some other examples of building out dashboards. So if especially if you're the implementer, make sure that you take that because it'll help you with your strategist. But even this, right? Even this helps clear out so much of the muck that causes the problem of people creating reports that nobody ever uses, or worse, especially from a strategist perspective, getting reports that you have no idea what to do with, which is mostly what happens. You get all these complicated reports with lots of numbers, nothing really makes any sense, doesn't have any clear action, and you're like, great, now what? Forget this. I'm just going to go practice whatever I think is going to need to be done. And that's where a lot of gut reaction comes from. That's why a lot of these changes and split tests and everything else people start doing aren't based on any sort of real numbers because the reports aren't right because they haven't gone through this process. So just going through this, super, super important. Now, I want to also pop in here, show you some of these other tabs that are here. Some of them you may use as a strategist. Again, some of you are going to be using this more from the implementation perspective if you have the implementer skills. But what's in here, the reason that these are here is because you can start to plan out how some of this information that might need to be in there might need to be passed into Google Analytics as an event. So for example, I might say completed a Toolbox membership, right? So they became a Toolbox member, which for us is just an opt-in. So I could put in whatever the URL is, and I would say, okay, what's the behavior? So this is going to be, an opt-in in this case, successful form. So opt-in, lead, whatever you call it, right? Use your own languaging as a company. And then I might say, okay, so we're going to say, new member. The member type is might how we break it down. We say this is a Toolbox member, so we're going to pass that event through, and then the label might be the page they were on or something like that, right? So I might say that. And again, I'm going to put in a little bit of stuff that those of you using Google Tag Manager will realize, but this might be like a variable. And again, if as an implementer, if you have the implementer skills or you are the implementer who happens to be watching this, you can put in that sort of stuff, right? If you're just a strategist, you might say, well, I also want to know what page they are. Now, if this stuff doesn't make sense to you as a strategist right now because you don't have any idea of Google Analytics or how they're structured or anything else, don't worry about it. You don't have to use this. This is your most important thing. Having a discussion with you and your implementer, walking through this process. The only big difference between what we talked about in a previous episode of Workshop, where we covered the workshop on building the actual implementation plan, is we just covered this Kia stuff. Now we're adding, okay, we're going to really flesh it out, have a good conversation, and tie it into what the report's going to look like. So we know the dashboard stuff so that you have an understanding, so that it says, okay, there's going to be a table here, or there's going to be a number broken down by traffic source as a filter with the date range, like all that sort of stuff. You're going to have an idea so that when it finally comes back to you, again, as a strategist, when your dashboard comes back to you, you're already going to have an understanding of how to use it because you helped build it, right? You helped build it. Now, the other tab here, I'm going to skip over the event plan we talked about, the customer journey step by step. I like these, especially as I'm more on the implementation side of things. I like to record. I'll do a little video. and I record the different stages and steps. So I might say, okay, well, here's where they're going to start. And then like in this example, it'd be like a sales page journey or something where they go here and then they go to the sales page and then they go to cart and then thank you page or whatever. I sometimes will pencil out a little funnel and I'll put that in there. I use like you can use the chart, but you can use anything for that. I'll put in screenshots of the pages. I'll put in the URLs with, GTM debug on there so I can see stuff. So again, this is also one of these tools that is used by both strategists and implementers. So I want you to be aware of this from a strategist perspective, but more importantly, making sure your implementers are aware of it. So again, your job is not to understand how to do all of this or to think it through. It's to make sure that your implementers are, because this is all about implementing your measurement plan. So again, your hard part, I would say that not hard part, it's the wrong word, but the effort is for you as a strategist is right in here, having these conversations. Do not think if you just did this, filling this out, and you went 1, 2, 3, 4, and it was that easy for you without thinking it through, you're probably missing out. Which is okay, because again, good enough to get going, but then have a conversation with your implementer because you probably don't know some things that they do where they can help you flesh these things out, and they can have a conversation and really dive into, okay, what did you mean by this action? Well, give me an example of that because they may not understand it. Your implementers have to understand this stuff, this side of it, because if they don't, they're going to give you dashboards that again, aren't going to be useful for you, or worse, reports you have no idea what to do with. And if that's happening, it's just because this wasn't done right? So you kind of have those conversations. Okay, so we left off at the customer journey. Now I want to talk about the KPI template. Now this is something you might think about as a strategist, but again, work with your implementers here. And this is just a different way of what we call results and how. And it uses the more traditional number stuff because people would ask, what's important for our KPI? And I always used to hate that because it's like this made up stuff that just sounds to make the whole thing more complicated than it is. Numbers are already complicated enough. Do we really need to call them KPIs? I mean, come on. So we call them results and how, and I am a still believer in that. However, some people are out there that are just comfortable with the languaging of KPIs. So the results, your primary result that you're going for is your KPI, your key performance indicator. So you put in whatever that metric is, right? For those of you who want to use that as that terminology, your number, the information, whatever, and then how you're going to get that. You can talk about or specifically the behaviors, right? That would be. Then you put in the platform that you're going to send the information to. How are you going to get it to that platform? The triggers that you're going to need to get it to that platform. This stuff, more implementer focused, right? So remember, this is the mind meld. This is where strategy starts crossing over into implementation, which is why some of this you're like, hey, as a strategist, I want to make sure I know this stuff and here's how I'm going to figure it out. But you're going to work with your implementers to make sure, okay, I need to have analytics have it and Facebook needs to have it and maybe Google Ads needs to have it at the same time, especially if it's a conversion or a purchase or something like that. Then you've got supporting metrics. Now, again, some of this you might know as a strategist. Other times working with your implementers, you'll find out some things you didn't know were even possible. Things like, for example, we'll come down to, I'm going to bring in the Academy real quick. So as we've created a report that essentially tells us, because the Academy is an application funnel. And so we have set this up. So if somebody comes in here and they see this for at least, I think it's 3 seconds for us, where they're kind of what we call investigating the offer, this actually fires a little event, right? Because our implementers on our team, I wanted to know from a strategy perspective, how were people using this funnel, right? So I zoom way out here, try to bring in a big page. You see this huge page here. Well, how are people interacting with the page? Where are we having the conversation with them where it's working? Where are we having the conversation where it's not working, right? That's what we want to know. So I worked with my implementation team. So the strategy is I want to know how the conversation is measured, and I want to be able to measure that so I can adjust copy, change headlines, build value where it needs to be built, slow people down where it needs to be slowed down, that sort of stuff. And their job was to figure out, okay, how do we do that? And that's where they came up with ideas like, let me go back to here, where they said, well, if this part of the page is viewable for at least 3 seconds, we're going to trigger a tag in or trigger an event in Google Analytics that says they were now investigated the offer. They're at least investigating. And then here is when they initiate. And so we call this the eyes on the journey report. So we've created this, and that became that whole thing came out of a conversation around this. Now remember, for eyes on the journey, if you want to see what that looks like, when Google Data Studio Dashboards Beyond Basics has lots of talk about that. It shows you examples of that. In fact, what we talked about with the planning. So I kind of went into more detail of how we plan that out there. But this was the basics. It started with something like this, with like, I want to know how many sales we're making, right? But then it comes down to what are the supporting metrics? How am I making those sales? Well, for Academy, it's number of pages page views. It's the number of people who actually get introduced to the brand. It's the number of people who actually investigate the offer, how many people actually start the application, how many people actually are qualified in that application and are invited to join the academy, how many of those actually do join, which is our primary KPI. And so we start seeing supporting metrics how metrics that feed the result metric, which is our KPI, which again, this is why I don't like KPIs and metrics. I think it's too complicated. It's results and how we're getting those results. That's all we're tracking here. But it's a different way, and it might be more comfortable for some of you. Again, you don't have to fill out every single one of these tabs, but it might be a comfortable way for some of you to work this thing through. The other thing I put in here was just something to remind you that you might want to break this stuff down. So I want to know what the academy is, but I might want to do it by device type or traffic source, or maybe traffic type, maybe campaign. Maybe I want to do it by if it's a lead type or something like that, like what type of lead is more likely to be in the academy. Maybe there's some engagement metrics I wanted to put in there, or some different demographic questions. Again, these are all just sort of examples of some things, but the idea is, okay, how am I going to break this down? Because it sort of helps your brain go through that process. It's like a little tool that you can use to help brainstorm, okay, what are the different ways that I'm going to see this conversion rate, so that you can do all of that now in the big giant planning stage of our measurement plan. You can do all of that stuff now so that you don't get a report and you go, well, that's all this is. I need it to do this, this, and this. And then your implementer goes, oh, okay. And they go back and they add a bunch of stuff. And sometimes that means they have to change things and adjust things, and it delays everything. But if you think about all that stuff now, which is kind of why this is here, to help jog those thoughts, then you can have a really good conversation with your implementer, essentially flesh this out into pretty good detail. Then they can take this and start building out your stuff so they can actually implement it, right? So this is them implementing your plan. Now, again, for the implementers, we talked about this, pods. This is the purpose, offer, and details. This is mostly for implementers. We did talk about this in the workshop around building the implementation plan, that as a strategist, you needed to understand purpose, offer, details. So if you want to learn more about that, just go back into the workshop. If you're an Academy member, you can go into the workshop library and you'll see it there. Just search for Build Measurement Plan. And you'll find it. But the purpose, offer, details, that's going to be for those of you who are implementers, and you'll put in, whatever the things are. If there's any issues, especially, and we see this all the time, people go through the pod analysis and they find broken links and they find things that just don't make sense, where the headlines are off or something like that. And so you can screen capture stuff, put it in there, and then say, okay, yeah, hey, I fixed this, or I need to investigate it, or it's an urgent matter, it needs to be adjusted, right? However you need to do that. The product map, I like this as an implementer when I was doing implementations, because it just sort of showed me everything that was out there. This is also good for a strategist, though, to say, okay, what are the different products? Because you might think, oh, I just sell widgets, but then in reality, you sell 37 variants of widgets. There's a 3-pack and a 6-pack, and there's the upsell pack that combines the other thing, and then there's a subscription, then there's the subscribe and save, and then there's the annual offer, and then you have all these different versions of your product. So I would put them all in here so that you sort of have an inventory that's also helpful for your implementers, because they're going to, especially when they're tracking like e-commerce and goals and things like that, they make sure they track all the different variants and think those things through. But again, this is something you'd work on with your implementers on. And then chart links. This is honestly, we just sort of had this as a reference back in the day. I kept it in here because I think it is kind of useful to have, like, okay, here's the, our webinar funnel chart, or here's our email chart, or here's our whatever campaign, Facebook campaign chart, because we do a lot of like just charting out stuff, right? We'll do a little flow chart with something with like Lucidchart. Again, you can use PowerPoint. You don't have to use Lucidchart, though it's a great tool. But PowerPoint or Keynote or Google Slides, even you can kind of get some stuff penciled out there so that you have a visual representation. And then ultimately, this could be turned into your dashboard links, because your dashboards can also be charted in Data Studio now, which is really nice. And you can have, here's a link to the main chart, and here's a link to the Google Data Studio report, and then everybody's got their measurement plan, and specifically this customer journey audit part of it in place. So that is going to help us to wrap this up. Again, the priority tab for you as a strategist is this part here, to make sure that you have thought this through and to say, okay, I'm going to put in the questions. I think this is 100% strategy, because your implementers probably won't know what questions to ask because they're not the ones that are actually taking action, but you are. So ask the different questions that you want to get answers to. Again, if you're not sure which ones they are, just go through results and how. What results am I getting? Think about whatever that means, whatever the result means for you, sales, leads, conversions, whatever the thing is, whatever the different products you sell. Then think about how. how am I selling those? So how many people are going through the webinar funnel, the Facebook funnel, the affiliate funnel? What different traffic sources are coming in? Those are all the sort of how supporting steps. Just put in as many questions as you can think about. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything answered because some of them might be redundant, but at least you can brainstorm all of that. Then this part you might have to work with your implementer on so that they can help you understand what information is going to be needed to get these. But this part is all you. So you think through and say, okay, when I know the answer to this question, I will know if it's this or this, right? This helps, this actions part really helps the implementers make sure they are collecting the right information, and it helps them build the report so that by default, that report is more likely to lead you to these actions without you having to quote unquote analyze it. I think if you have to analyze a report, that you've already lost. I don't like having to analyze reports. I'm just not a believer in that. I think you can make dashboards really simple, and dashboards that deliver answers so you can take actions, they're awesome. And you can do that. And part of how you do that is this stuff right here. But again, this is the strategy. You have to start working with your implementers at this point to actually start implementing your measurement plan. And this is how you translate it from just strategy of I want to know these answers to, okay, here are the actions I want to take, which is the thing that most people skip, but this is what you think through. And again, this is you as a strategist. Then this and this, you're working with your implementers on to really focus that out. And then the rest of the stuff they might use is supporting docs. Again, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, but you make sure that they are aware of those different tools that are available for them. And of course, throughout this entire process, if they need help, assuming that you're a Win Monthly Pass or an Academy member, you've got us. We have Ask Instructor Support. And you can say, hey, here are the questions I'm asking. Here's the information we think we need. Here's our funnels. Like, walk us through it. Let us take a look at it. Get us a fresh pair of eyes on it because we can help you with that. Because we've done this a lot. We've seen all different business models, all different funnel types, handled most platforms at this point. So we can give you some insight and some of our experience, and we are absolutely willing to do that. Just got to send us over a video or a screenshot that shows like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what we're thinking. And we'll be happy to offer advice. And of course, your implementers in particular, if they need help with something, you just assume like, hey, I heard that you can measure something when somebody sees a few seconds of a page, of a certain part. I know that that's possible. Can you work with them to figure it out? That's all you need to do. You don't need to know it as a strategist. If your job is really just focused on strategy, don't get in the weeds. You don't need to, especially if it's not your forte, but your implementers do. So what you can do is make sure that your implementers are working with the instructors at measurementmarketing.io, and we'll help them with that using the Ask Instructor support system. And again, that's available to anybody who's Win Monthly Pass or Academy. So they have that. And of course, as an Academy member, they actually have group coaching as well. So they can take advantage of that, and we can actually walk them through it and talk them through it on a call. Okay, so with that, hopefully you got at least one thing out of this entire process. Maybe it was that idea of, okay, we reviewed Kia. Now we're starting to see it in a form, and it's got a little bit more structure to it, and you're starting to see a little bit more of the go back and forth of how this works. Maybe it's the idea that, okay, building the plan is kind of thinking more on your end where you sort of build out the stuff that you want. But when you go to implement a measurement plan, you have to bring in the implementer. You have to bring in the person who's actually going to be doing the tag manager and the Google Analytics and setting up the pixels, because they have a different viewpoint, and they, depending upon their skills, will be able to really help level up your plan. So that's where the two of you are working together, and this Kia process will help with that. And of course, as you need guidance, even if it's just a fresh pair of eyes, just use the Ask Instructor support system. Send us over a quick video that shows us kind of what's going on, what you're thinking, and why. And we'll be happy to be like, yep, thumbs up, that looks awesome. Or here's something else you might consider. When we were going through your funnel, we noticed this could be a possible behavior that you might want to be able to measure. And here's why, because you can now take these actions. Like, we'll help you with that as long as you ask us. So that's all you need to do. Again, if you're a Win Monthly Pass or Academy member, you've got total access to that. All right, speaking of, we've talked about Win courses. We've got lots of little individual courses. They stand for What I Need. Measure.tips/courses will take you there. You'll see our Kickstarter packs if you just want to get training around a certain tool or platform. But Win Monthly Pass is what I'd recommend. You'll also see the details there, measure.tips/courses. Win Monthly Pass is all you can eat. You get all the different courses. You get the Ask Instructor support. And just keep it for as long as you find it useful. And we do new wins about every month or so. And again, the next win is coming up in the middle part of May, and that's going to be around forecasting and results. So we're going to do win forecasting results will be a new win for us. So those of you who are members will be seeing that in May. Also, the Measurement Marketing Academy that I mentioned. Now, the Academy is really made for teams. It is application only, so it is not for everybody. It is a high-end program. It is high ticket. So it is application only. Measure.tips/start will take you to the page where you can learn more about the Academy. The biggest difference is because it is made for teams, it has 4 logins. Everybody gets their own win courses, and we really focus on the different roles. So the Academy instructors are back there to help you out. If you're a strategist, they can help out through implementers. You can use us to help with training. We've got Academy offer support. You got another whole other workshop library that you have access to that Win Monthly Pass members don't. So there's just a ton back there with the Academy. So measure.tips/start will take you to there so you can learn more about that. And of course, if you are already an Academy member, thank you as always. We look forward to seeing you on the Academy Members Office Hours Q&A. It is every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to join us for office hours because you can really just share your screens and chat stuff out and you can see what other people are doing. It's a really cool peer network, and typically less than 10 people a week are on this call. It depends how many people are having issues, but the reason I want to emphasize that is because everybody gets a chance to really talk and ask questions, which is great. So we like keeping those groups small at this for the office hours member Q&A. So make sure if you got questions, pop on there and ask yours, because sometimes it's just easier to talk stuff out. All right, next week's workshop is going to be a What's New workshop because it's the first workshop. In this case, it'll be the first workshop of May. And we're going to talk about the updates and features that were released in April. So will have been some changes, even though with everything going on in the world that I'm sure most of Google's working from home, as everybody else is pretty much working from home in the world. But they have managed to get out some updates. So we're going to talk about the different updates and the features that have been released for April 2020. And that'll be a great one for you as a strategist to watch. Also, your implementers. Make sure the entire team watches that one because the What's New helps you get caught up on all the changes to Data Studio and Google Analytics and Tag Manager and whatever else was updated from a measurement perspective over the last 30 days. Because you never know. Sometimes you find a fix or a feature update that you can start taking advantage of to help your own measurement journey. All right. So with that, we will go ahead and start to wrap it up. Now, I do want to remind, if you are not yet, you've heard about Win Monthly Pass and you've heard about the Academy, but if you're not yet a member at all, we do offer a free membership. It's called the Toolbox, the Measurement Marketing Toolbox membership. And that includes all of this and more of what you see here. It's like 40 different tools that are back there now. But Workshop Wednesday, which are these workshops, you get these each and every week back there. You get the traffic tracking toolkit, the report card, the behavior toolkit. You're going to see the customer journey audit, the tool we just showed you here will be back there. So all these tools that you see on Workshop Wednesdays, they're featured in the Toolbox members area. So you'll have access to those. Again, Measurement Marketing Toolbox membership. In order to open up your free account, it is free to get started. Just measure.tips/ww. And then you'll have access to everything. So, and then if you want to upgrade later, you can, but you don't have to. You can still just keep access to the tools and get the free weekly workshops. And if that's all you need, more power to you. It's just our way of being able to give back to the community. So measure.tips/ww to learn more about that. And we look forward to seeing you in the members area soon. All right. You've just watched Strategy Session, how to implement a measurement plan. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.